The film begins with a narrative about a grand conspiracy orchestrated by a group of invisible people from the wealthy elite who feel they are the most powerful in the world and can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, one of the group's henchmen seems to be in need of something. He even states that he should have attended Angela's birthday party last night, but instead, he went to a place that got him into new trouble. He is Elliot Anderson, the main character in this story, and he is seen sitting in a coffee shop waiting for someone, who turns out to be the owner of the place. The owner is Rohit Mehta, also known as Ron, and the shop is named Ron's Coffee. During the meeting, Elliot, who is essentially a nobody to Ron, reveals his actions in hacking Ron's personal data, including discovering Ron's Play 2 Boys website, which is an adult site with 100 terabytes of illegal content featuring minors. This is clearly against the law, especially since the site has 400,000 loyal customers, which could easily land Ron in legal trouble. Hearing this, Ron is initially shocked, especially with all the printouts of his dirty business dealings. He accuses Elliot of trying to blackmail him and refuses to give him any money. However, it seems money is not what Elliot wants. It's unclear what Elliot is thinking, but it seems he just wants to punish Ron by reporting the case to the police. The conversation doesn't last long as Elliot leaves the coffee shop just as the police arrive to arrest Ron. Elliot is portrayed as an ordinary employee working as a cybersecurity technician at a company called AllSafe. However, he reveals that he often acts as a hacker, punishing those who act unjustly in his eyes. This has made him an enemy of many officials, as his actions, lasting only a few minutes, can land his targets in legal trouble, including Ron. One day, Elliot arrives at his office and receives a stack of papers from his boss, Gideon. Angela, his childhood friend who is also struggling with student loan debt, is seen arguing with Gideon about a meeting with a partner company scheduled for later that day. Angela's mood is already ruined due to Elliot's absence at her birthday party last night. Soon after, Angela's boyfriend, Ollie Parker, arrives, and Elliot, who doesn't like him, leaves them. After finishing his work at the office, Elliot visits a psychiatrist to discuss his mental health issues, particularly his disappointment with his surroundings that makes him distant from social life. Instead of finding peace, Elliot judges that Dr. Krista Gordon, the psychiatrist, is more flawed than him, based on her social media accounts that he hacked into. The next day, while Elliot is at his desk, Ollie approaches him, trying to establish a good relationship with him. However, Elliot, already aware of Ollie's personality from hacking his social media, doesn't respond well. Through Ollie's social media, Elliot discovers his infidelity with a woman named Stella. Elliot contemplates telling Angela about the affair but hesitates, fearing it will break her heart. Shortly after, several people from E Corp, one of the world's largest gadget developers and a client of Elliot's company, arrive. In his mind, Elliot views people at E Corp as evil conglomerates, even thinking that the E in the company name stands for evil, reflecting his deep hatred for the company. Moreover, he is one of the technicians working for their partner company. In his mind, Elliot also revealed his thoughts on Kohlberg, E Corp's chief technology officer, whom he deemed completely unworthy of the position due to his lack of knowledge about technology. Kohlberg rarely uses computers and still uses a BlackBerry, which only makes him look foolish and arrogant. Elliot was impressed by Tyrell, E Corp's young technology director, who, surprisingly, still uses KDE, a Linux-based software that is inadequate for his performance. That night, Elliot, who has been living alone in his apartment, starts feeling lonely and anxious again, which leads him to cry without knowing how to escape these feelings. This habit makes him turn to morphine whenever he starts feeling overwhelmed. Unfortunately, that night Elliot runs out of morphine and decides to buy some from a friend named Shayla, resulting in them spending the night together in bed. Surprisingly, despite being exhausted from having sex with Shayla, Elliot is still awake. He even starts playing with his phone and finds a post from Krista, who is at a nearby restaurant. Elliot becomes interested because Krista, his psychiatrist, is with her boyfriend, Michael, whom Elliot has wanted to hack to satisfy his curiosity about Krista's boyfriend. Consequently, Elliot goes to their location to carry out his plan. Upon arriving, Elliot notices two people who were following him earlier. His attention quickly shifts to Krista and Michael as they leave the restaurant. Cleverly, Elliot contacts the taxi company Michael uses, pretending he left his keys in the car. This allows him to track Michael's destination. When he meets Michael, Elliot asks to borrow his phone, claiming he needs to call his mother because his phone is out of battery. He quickly calls his own phone to get Michael's number, making it easier for him to carry out his plan later. On his way home, Elliot receives a call from Angela, asking him to come to the office immediately. She informs him that E Corp server is under attack by a group of hackers. Unlike previous attacks, this time, the hackers launch a DDoS attack by installing a rootkit on E Corp server, rendering it uncontrollable. The virus encrypts data and corrupts the host, leaving only one way to resolve the chaos: shut down and clean the entire infected server. As a result, Elliot and Gideon fly to Dallas, the location of E Corp server. There, Elliot demonstrates his exceptional skills in securing the client server, restoring everything to safety thanks to his outstanding performance. Not satisfied with just resolving the crisis, Elliot becomes curious about the hacker behind the attack on E Corp server and begins investigating. He firmly believes that every hacker leaves traces because hacking always has a purpose. He becomes more suspicious when he easily discovers the identity of the hacker, who calls themselves Mr. Robot. The hacker also sends a message, stating they want to remain on the server. Unsure of what to think, Elliot, initially prepared to destroy the hacker and clean the infected server, changes his mind and lets the virus remain, hoping to use it for various purposes later. On the plane, Gideon expresses gratitude for Elliot's heroic actions on E Corp's server. He mentions that E Corp supports 80% of AllSafe's business continuity, meaning AllSafe could go bankrupt without clients like E Corporation. Hearing this, Elliot promises to find the hacker behind the chaos on E Corp's server. On his way home, Elliot, sitting alone in the train carriage, is suddenly approached by a man who seems to be rambling. However, his conversation tends to focus on the recent DDoS attack, even inviting Elliot to join him. Although initially indifferent and annoyed by the man's presence, Elliot realizes the possibility that he might be connected to the hacker who attacked E Corp's server, so he reveals his dark past and involvement in robberies, noting that robberies can now be conducted through the internet. In a district in Brooklyn, a hacker group called Society uses a building as their headquarters. The man explains that all their activities are conducted in that one location, but he doesn't reveal how the group operates or any characteristics. The meeting doesn't last long, and Elliot continues his journey home. Still curious about Society, Elliot starts searching the internet but finds no information about the group or the man referred to as Mr. Robot. He only discovers that the building housing the hackers is owned by a company named Fun Society, whose owner was shot dead a year and a half ago. Unsatisfied with the lack of information, Elliot decides to visit the hacker group again. Outside the Society headquarters, Elliot meets a female hacker who is also a member of the group. The woman, identified as Darlene, asks Elliot to grant access to the main directory on E Corp's server, claiming she created the rootkit that caused the chaos at E Corporation. However, their conversation is cut short by the arrival of Mr. Robot, who warmly greets Elliot and invites him to enjoy a Ferris wheel ride together, where they discuss their plans. Mr. Robot began to share many things, including plans for the FBI and the American Cybersecurity Center to visit AllSafe the next day. He asked Elliot to alter a file date by inserting Tyrell Wellick's IP address into it. The goal was to have E Corp's chief technology officer arrested by the police for causing chaos on E Corp's servers to benefit himself. Mr. Robot claimed that what Elliot would do by altering the file would become the greatest revolutionary movement in the world by gradually overthrowing people from the upper echelons of society. Initially, Elliot was reluctant to frame Tyrell or anyone else. However, he started to waver after hearing Mr. Robot's arguments, which resonated with the current societal conditions, especially for the lower class like himself. Back at his apartment, Elliot, who kept pondering Mr. Robot's words, eventually realized he agreed with Society's plan. He decided to follow Mr. Robot's request and inserted Tyrell's IP address into the file data. The next day, a meeting was held at All Safe with several parties present, including FBI agents. Interestingly, Angela, who was moderating the meeting, was almost ignored by Tyrell, who even interrupted her several times as she spoke. Shortly after, the atmosphere became tense when Tyrell whispered something to a file and then spoke with Gideon outside the room. Soon after, Allsafe's leader asked Angela to leave the room. Seeing this, Elliot asked Tyrell why Angela had to leave the room, as his colleague knew more about the details of the DDoS attack. However, Tyrell insisted that the meeting was only for those who understood technology, implying Angela was not needed. Hearing Tyrell's arrogant behavior and reasoning, Elliot, in frustration, revealed his findings, which showed a rootkit configuration file with an IP address pattern. 19 days passed, and there was still no news about Tyrell's arrest, as Mr. Robot had predicted. The days felt monotonous and full of questions since there had been no visits from the FBI, Tyrell, or other E Corp officials. Elliot even visited the society headquarters again, but it seemed the hacker group had vacated the place, leaving the building empty. In his free time, Elliot remembered Krista and resumed his investigation into Michael by pretending to be an officer. He managed to gather some information about Krista's boyfriend by calling him. Elliot quickly uncovered some findings through Michael's social media accounts. Armed with this information, Elliot confronted Michael, who was out with his wife and child. Not wanting to waste time, Elliot demanded that Michael leave Krista, threatening to expose the truth about him. Michael, unwilling to see his family fall apart because of Elliot, reluctantly agreed. Interestingly, Elliot didn't just leave afterward. Instead, he asked to take the dog Michael had with him back to his apartment. Having completed his business with Michael, Elliot seemed quite pleased, especially with the small dog he brought along. He named the dog Flipper. It was also revealed that Michael was not the only person Elliot had issues with, as he collected data on everyone he had dealt with, storing it on DVDs he called his digital graveyard. The next day, wanting to ensure his actions regarding Michael had gone smoothly, Elliot visited Krista again. He found her looking different from before, appearing sad, as if Michael had indeed ended their relationship. At the office, Elliot, feeling sympathy for Angela, who was kicked out of the previous meeting, tried to comfort his colleague. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden silence as everyone in the office focused on the TV news reporting Tyrell's arrest. E Corp's technology director was accused of orchestrating the hacking that caused significant losses for E Corp. Elliot, who had doubted Mr. Robot and his group about the arrest, now felt very pleased and satisfied as it finally happened. He even expressed his joy amidst the busy streets of New York City. However, the moment didn't last long, as a group of men approached him, asking him to come with them. Feeling alone and still guilty about Tyrell's arrest, Elliot complied with the men's request. Upon arrival at the destination, Elliot, escorted by the men, walked down a hallway into a room as requested. To his surprise, there were already several men waiting for him inside. Interestingly, one of the men in the room was Tyrell, who was sitting and warmly greeted him. Whatever was going through Elliot's mind, his expression could not hide his shock at what he was witnessing. After initially being taken aback by the presence of Tyrell in the room, Elliot's mind was filled with questions about why he was brought there. Tyrell explained his reasons for bringing Elliot to the office, which included the 11 men present, who were revealed to be his lawyers. Tyrell thanked Elliot for helping him rise to a higher position, replacing Tyrell, who was imprisoned. He also offered Elliot a position at E Corp as part of their cybersecurity team, promising a higher salary that could make him a millionaire in just 5 years. However, Tyrell clarified that his offer was not coercion. Elliot could choose to stay at Allsafe or join E Corp. Hearing this, Elliot was clearly confused. He enjoyed working at Allsafe but was tempted by the prospect of a large salary at E Corporation. He asked for time to think about it. Tyrell then instructed his lawyers to leave the room so he could speak privately with Elliot. During their conversation, Tyrell mentioned that he was currently acting as interim CTO to replace Tyrell but planned to become the company's CEO, known as Evil Corporation. He was ambitious about becoming the youngest and first CEO of the giant company, but he acknowledged he still needed a hacker's services to achieve his goal. Tyrell emphasized that E Corp planned to address their cybersecurity issues internally and no longer rely on external partners, including AllSafe, which would cease collaboration with E Corp under Tyrell's leadership. Rather than being more interested in joining the company, Elliot expressed his intention to stay at AllSafe, regardless of the current circumstances. Tyrell, hearing Elliot's decision, couldn't say much more and reluctantly Elliot was escorted by one of Tyrell's men, who introduced himself as Sunderland and gave him Tyrell's business card, suggesting Elliot could contact E Corp if he changed his mind. Without saying much, Elliot took the business card without paying much attention to Sunderland's words, as his focus was on Shayla, who appeared to be in an argument with a man in front of his apartment building. Elliot quickly got out of the car and approached her. Shayla, who had been waiting for Elliot, immediately approached him, eager to get into her friend's apartment, while the man, identified as her boyfriend, couldn't do much and left them alone. Inside his apartment, Elliot kept pondering Tyrell's job offer. This led him to check the young director's profile. It didn't take long for Elliot to find the email and password for Tyrell's social media accounts, including his E Corp account. He quickly delved deeper into Tyrell's information, but his overthinking made him suspect that Tyrell had deliberately left his accounts easy to hack to discover who was behind all the hacking activities. Realizing he might be trapped, Elliot decided to shut down all his internet access and destroy some devices on his personal computer. The next day, Elliot returned to work, appearing unfocused since Mr. Robot hadn't contacted him since Tyrell's arrest. However, his thoughts were interrupted when Gideon summoned him to his office. His boss wanted to raise Elliot's salary, acknowledging that he saved AllSafe during the recent E Corp server incident. Gideon also questioned Elliot about discovering the file containing Tyrell's IP address, suggesting that Elliot should have discussed it before the meeting instead of reporting it directly to the FBI, which led to Tyrell's arrest. Hearing this, Elliot could only claim he didn't know it was Tyrell's IP address, though Gideon didn't fully accept this explanation. Moreover, a group called Society recently claimed responsibility for the E Corp hack, releasing a video threatening to destroy E Corp if their demands were not met. These demands included releasing Tyrell, freeing all debt-ridden prisoners of the giant company, and dissolving E Corp to donate their assets to charity worldwide. Upon arriving at his apartment, Elliot was surprised to find his apartment door open and Shayla inside, taking a shower. They didn't have much conversation because shortly after, Darlene, a representative from Society, arrived at the apartment and asked Elliot to come with her. Interestingly, the journey to Society's headquarters, which Elliot had eagerly anticipated, was marked by tension, as Darlene noticed two men following them. Quickly, she urged Elliot to board a train that would take them to their destination. Upon reaching Society's headquarters, Elliot received a warm welcome from the hacker group, who considered him successful in manipulating E Corp's server. However, his thoughts were consumed by curiosity about how Society knew his apartment's location, including the risks of Tyrell discovering his actions with Society, which could lead to imprisonment or even death. Together with Mr. Robot, Elliot was briefed on their new plan targeting Steel Mountain, a facility known for storing critical data for many large companies, including evil corporation. Mr. Robot explained that by hacking Steel Mountain, they could access incriminating data on several major corporations and use it to extort money to secure Tyrell's release. Mr. Robot was even willing to blow up a gas pipe to destroy the facility and erase all data. Elliot's task was to assist Darlene in planting her worm virus in the U.S. data center. Hearing the plan, Elliot, worried about the potential impact of their attack, chose to back out of the mission. He didn't want to harm others, especially since the plan posed significant environmental risks around Steel Mountain. Mr. Robot repeatedly explained that the mission aimed to overthrow corrupt elites and conglomerates that had harmed society. He even threatened Elliot, stating that refusing the mission meant leaving society. Still, Elliot refused to change his stance and left the place in frustration. On his way home, Elliot considered reporting what he had experienced and society's latest plan targeting Steel Mountain. However, he worried that doing so might implicate him, leading to imprisonment. Ultimately, he couldn't decide what action to take. Upon arriving at his apartment, Elliot was shocked to find Fernando already there while Shayla was in the bathroom. They talked while waiting for her to finish. During their conversation, it was revealed that Elliot had hacked Fernando's social media accounts, uncovering evidence of his drug trafficking activities online. Surprisingly, such operations should have been easily detected by the police, yet Fernando remained free. Elliot considered imprisoning Fernando with all the evidence of his crimes. Shortly after, the dealer left, seemingly pleased with his time with Shayla at the apartment. Shayla, still in the bathroom, forced Elliot to enter, only to find her unconscious in the bathtub. Strangely, she claimed to be shocked at finding herself there. Elliot was burdened by Shayla's situation, urging her to stop seeing Fernando, who had clearly exploited her while she was under the influence of drugs. However, Shayla refused Elliot's request, arguing that Fernando was her only supplier who offered low prices, which was highly beneficial for her. Elliot realized that Shayla's circumstances had forced her into a dark world with no other choices. Much like what Mr. Robot had said about the cruelty of elites and conglomerates, ultimately leading many people to unfortunate fates. With all these thoughts in mind, Elliot finally decided to send Fernando to prison. The following day, after making up his mind, he dared to report the crimes committed by Fernando and his accomplices, having hacked into the dealer's social media accounts. As a result, it didn't take long for the police to apprehend the entire trafficking gang. Meanwhile, Ali, who was trying to copy files from a CD, noticed something strange with his laptop. The disk kept ejecting, and the laptop's performance became slower each time he tried. Elliot, who could usually be relied on for such issues, was unreachable. However, Ali's worries about his laptop vanished when he received a sexy photo from Stella in his email, asking him to meet her that night. Being unfaithful by nature, Ali replied to Stella, saying he would contact her soon, and even lied to Angela, claiming he was invited by a friend to have drinks in Arizona. Angela, inherently naive and too loyal to her boyfriend, allowed Ali to leave without suspecting anything unusual. Elsewhere, a hacker, who had successfully breached Ali's laptop, was using its camera, which was directed at Angela. Shortly after, the mysterious hacker sent a message in Chinese to a colleague, reporting that they had successfully accessed, having changed his mind, approached Mr. Robot, who was at a park by the beach. Their conversation began with an argument, as Elliot was considered to have left society. However, he pleaded to rejoin, and Mr. Robot set a condition. Elliot must talk about his late father's past. Without hesitation, Elliot began to recount his father's character, who had been very close to him, almost like a best friend. His father used to work at E Corp as one of their best computer technicians. Unfortunately, he had developed an illness that gradually worsened his health. Elliot's father had asked him not to reveal the illness to anyone, including his mother. However, as his father's condition became critical, Elliot felt compelled to tell his mother. This led to his father's deep resentment toward him, even expressing his anger by pushing Elliot out of a window, resulting in a broken arm. From that moment on, there was no more conversation between them, even until his father's passing. After hearing Elliot's story about his father, Mr. Robot remarked that his father's decision was justified because he had every right to be angry and disappointed, considering Elliot had betrayed his trust. Shortly after, Mr. Robot suddenly pushed Elliot over the railing, causing him to fall, as if to emphasize that he also felt upset and disappointed because the trust he had given to Elliot was betrayed by Elliot himself. The story continues with Tyrell, who is preparing his campaign to become the new Chief Technology Officer of E Corporation. He appears highly ambitious, determined to do whatever it takes to achieve his desired position. However, all his preparations seem futile when his superior, Philip Price, informs him that E Corp already has a new CTO candidate. Philip even mentions that the E Corp board is thrilled with the profile of the new candidate. Tyrell's frustration grows when Philip asks him to schedule a meeting between the new CTO candidate and the E Corp executives. Meanwhile, Elliot, who had an incident at the beach, is beginning to regain consciousness. Krista, visiting him at the hospital, accuses him of using illegal substances, suggesting that his fall was due to drugs. Elliot insists that the accident was the result of some kid's mischief, but Krista doesn't believe him. She demands Elliot take drug tests twice a month to be allowed to leave the hospital and resume his normal life. Elliot reluctantly admits that he once used morphine but claims he no longer does, so he is confident he can pass the tests. Not wanting to face more trouble, Elliot hacks the hospital system to alter his drug test results from positive to negative. He views the head of IT at the hospital as unqualified and blames the hospital's incompetence for relying on such workers, especially given their low pay, which might demotivate them. With his altered test results, Elliot is allowed to leave the hospital and return to his routine. At a convenience store with Shayla, Elliot tries to pay for his purchases with a credit card but can't because the financial system is down, affected by a hacker attack. This incident makes Elliot realize that all his current problems stem from himself, including his actions with Mr. Robot. Upon entering his apartment, Shayla expresses her anger about Fernando's recent arrest for murder, suspecting Elliot's involvement. She repeatedly tries to make Elliot understand the consequences of Fernando's imprisonment, as his drug dealers and subordinates have lost their income, just like Shayla herself, who now has no source of earnings. Elliot, not wanting to admit it, argues that he wants Shayla to be free from such illegal activities. After arguing with Shayla, Elliot is surprised to find Darlene in his apartment, sparking another confrontation. Frustrated with society and Mr. Robot's actions, Elliot demands Darlene leave. She initially intended to invite Elliot back to society but leaves without achieving her goal. Meanwhile, Ollie, who was confused by his increasingly slow laptop, discovers it has been hacked through the CD drive installation. To his dismay, the hacker has accessed compromising photos of Stella, which she often sent Ollie via email. The hacker calls Ollie, threatening to release all the photos within 100 hours. Ollie is panicked and closes his laptop. The hacker then sends a chat message in Chinese, indicating he is not working alone and that Ollie has likely been a target for a while. Back at work, Elliot is summoned to Gideon's office, along with other employees, for a dinner invitation at Gideon's house. Unlike the others, Elliot shows no interest and declines the invitation, citing prior commitments. His refusal stems from wanting to keep his actions with society secret, distancing himself from others, including rejecting Gideon's invitation. Returning to his desk, Elliot finds Mr. Robot waiting for him. Filled with anger, Elliot confronts Mr. Robot, who responds by threatening to expose Elliot's true identity if he doesn't cooperate. With no choice, Elliot agrees to join Mr. Robot at a bar. At the bar, Mr. Robot apologizes for his previous actions, acknowledging that emotions can lead to violence. He compares the situation to Elliot's late father, who was harsh with Elliot but might have wanted to apologize had he lived. After apologizing, Mr. Robot leaves Elliot, urging him not to harbor resentment toward his father. Driven by curiosity, Elliot stops Mr. Robot to ask about society's plans. Intriguingly, Mr. Robot reveals that Elliot himself is the key to their plans, implying that everything hinges on him. Mr. Robot then departs, saying, "See you in another life," suggesting that society is over now that Elliot, their pivotal member, is gone. Feeling reborn, Elliot, previously burdened by society's shadow, is relieved by Mr. Robot's words. He begins to consider living a normal life, like everyone else, and plans to pursue a relationship with Shayla. Elliot, who usually wore a gloomy expression, now seems happier and even smiles occasionally. He approaches Gideon, reversing his earlier decision and accepting the dinner invitation, expressing his desire to bring a date, which surprises and delights Gideon. At his apartment, Elliot confesses his feelings to Shayla, inviting her to join him for dinner at Gideon's house. Initially hesitant, Shayla doubts Elliot's sincerity, fearing heartbreak. However, recognizing Elliot's genuine intentions, she agrees to be his girlfriend and accompany him to the dinner, marking a new chapter in their lives. Simultaneously, Tyrell is in his room, engrossed with his phone as he seriously stares at the screen, which displays a man's Facebook profile, including his location. Tyrell then asks his wife, Joanna Wellick, for permission to go to a nightclub, which he knows is where the account owner. Anwar Rashid, Tyrell, who hasn't yet spotted Anwar, is approached by the man himself. Although they aren't close, they seem to recognize each other. Tyrell explains that he wants to take Anwar somewhere, but Anwar seems skeptical about the invitation. Meanwhile, the dinner party at Gideon's house begins, with a man named Harry warmly greeting the guests. Everyone enjoys the dinner and the company, but the mood shifts when Elliot sees a news report on TV about a toxic waste scandal in Washington from 1993. The pollution had led to 26 employees developing leukemia while working at an E Corp-owned factory. Despite the victims' families filing lawsuits against E Corp, they lost due to insufficient evidence. The news report mentions that with Colby's recent arrest, he might be implicated in the old case, potentially facing an additional 24 months in prison. Memories of his late father flood Elliot's mind, prompting him to leave Gideon's house, followed by Angela. She reveals that her mother was also a victim of the toxic waste incident, along with Elliot's father. Elsewhere, Tyrell secretly installs an app on Anwar's phone, though his intentions remain unclear. At the same time, Ali, tormented by the hacker's threats, finally admits to Angela about his affair with Stella and shows her the hacked photos on his laptop. Angela is furious not only about the cheating but also because her bank account was hacked, likely due to using Ali's laptop for online banking. Initially, Angela wants to break up, but realizing they share the same hacker problem, she decides to stay with Ali. Back with Elliot, infuriated by the news, he heads to the society headquarters, ready to resume his hacking activities. He shares his plan to hack into Steel Mountain's climate control system and raise the temperature to destroy all the magnetic tapes. Leslie Romero, a society member, doubts the plan, arguing that they would need to physically infiltrate the heavily guarded Steel Mountain facility, which spans 145 acres in the remote Adirondack Mountains. The facility has tight security, including 3-ton steel doors, armed guards working 24/7, closed-circuit cameras, and a skilled network supervision team, making infiltration nearly impossible. A debate ensues but is cut short when Elliot suddenly feels unwell, forcing him to leave the headquarters. At home, Elliot resorts to taking drugs, claiming it's necessary. The next day, while walking his dog, he feels followed by 2 strange men, prompting him to return to his apartment. Still under the influence, Elliot experiences intense anxiety when someone knocks on his door. Initially fearing it's the 2 men, he discovers it's Darlene, urging him to return to the headquarters as Romero has new insights on his plan. At the headquarters, Elliot is confused as Romero continues opposing his idea, revealing E Corp's increased security protocols. Romero also presents documents detailing E Corp's 5 major storage facilities, making him more skeptical of Elliot's plan. Rather than studying the documents, Elliot questions their origin, to which Romero nonchalantly responds that they share the same network with E Corp. This revelation makes Elliot realize the significance of April 1st, as all magnetic tapes are still stored in New York facilities. Although more debates arise, society eventually agrees to proceed with Elliot's plan. Some members set out immediately, while Darlene and Trenton head to meet the infamous Chinese hacker group, the Dark Army. As preparations unfold, Elliot suddenly experiences nausea, seizures, and extreme heat, ultimately collapsing. Mr. Robot decides to delay the mission, allowing Elliot to rest and recover before resuming their plans. Meanwhile, Angela, intending to discuss the hacked laptop with Elliot, finds him absent and instead meets Shayla. The 2 decide to hang out together. Back at society, Elliot's condition remains critical, prompting a heated argument between Romero and Mr. Robot. Upon waking, Elliot insists he needs morphine to continue with the mission. Reluctantly, Mr. Robot takes Elliot to a local drug dealer. Meanwhile, Darlene and Trenton arrive at a nightclub, hoping to find the Dark Army. Their search proves fruitless, and a heavily intoxicated Darlene eventually leaves. Outside the club, they are intercepted by a waiting limousine, seemingly anticipating their arrival. Inside, Darlene and Trenton meet 2 masked figures who demand their phones before transporting them to a location where they meet Cisco, Darlene's old friend and the hacker who breached Ollie's laptop. Furious, Darlene confronts Cisco about disappearing, making it difficult to find him. She pleads with him to join their mission with society, but aware of the mission's risks, Cisco refuses. Darlene begs Cisco for his assistance, desperate for his help. Back with Elliot, he awakens after receiving the drugs, feeling much better. Romero prepares a drink to help him recover, and they gather their supplies to proceed with their mission. Angela sneaks into her office to attempt using Ollie's CD on her work computer, but she must leave abruptly when a coworker arrives, forcing her to flee the scene. Fernando is seen in his prison cell with a lawyer who seems unable to provide any defense against the charges against him. The overwhelming evidence, including social media screenshots and photos, has firmly implicated the drug dealer in the crime. Surprisingly, the drug transactions conducted via social media were traced back to DeFera, Fernando's sister. Worse, nearly every successful transaction was posted on Twitter. Despite DeFera's claims that she was careful, Fernando notices a familiar photo among those reported by someone identifying as anonymous. He starts to recall and realize who might have reported him, leading to the beginning of this new chapter. In a coffee shop, Mr. Robot initiates the plan by stealing an access card from an employee at Steel Mountain, allowing the Brazilian hacking group to enter the target area. Elliot then starts his mission to plant a Raspberry Pi into the climate control system at Steel Mountain. He is equipped with a tiny communication device to guide him. In the Steel Mountain lobby, Elliot, using his new identity as Sam, meets Bill Harper, an employee who will give him a tour of the first floor. Unfortunately, the plan to tour the facility is initially thwarted because visitors must schedule appointments in advance. However, Mr. Robot anticipated this, and Elliot is eventually allowed to take the tour after Mobley from Society edits Wikipedia to falsely list Sam's profile as someone with significant wealth. This trick is used to spread a virus via a CD drive on the target. Ends her relationship with Ollie and returns his office access card and the CD drive. She leaves Ollie's apartment in a fit of rage, ignoring his pleas. Back with Elliot while touring Steel Mountain, he requests to meet with the supervisor as instructed by Mr. Robot. Unfortunately, their next target, Wendy Gallagher, is unavailable because she is with her wife who is giving birth. As a result, only another employee named Trudy Device can meet with Elliot. Panicked, Elliot and the rest of society realize they cannot find any social media profiles for Trudy and only have her husband's phone number. They manage to distract Trudy by sending an SMS from her husband, claiming he is in the hospital. This causes Trudy to leave Elliot and rush to the reception area. However, Elliot faces a new challenge. The lift now requires a fingerprint scan for operation. He is forced to use the emergency stairs to reach the second floor. Upon reaching the second floor, Elliot encounters Tyler, who is also there. Although initially suspicious and engaging in a brief conversation, Elliot and Tyler start to circle each other, with Elliot's anxiety escalating. He realizes that Tyler is not just a regular worker but a cunning individual who will do anything to get what he wants. Elliot pretends to be reviewing routine data processes, which piques Tyler's interest and leads him to invite Elliot to lunch, away from the office. This unexpected invitation threatens to waste valuable time, prompting society to devise a new plan. Recognizing Tyler's arrogance and conceit, Mr. Robot exploits this as a weakness, convincing Elliot that Tyler would not dine at a modest place. Consequently, the lunch is redirected to an executive dining room, a space frequented by the elite. However, the executive room's lack of signal coverage for their communication devices forces Elliot to rely on his own judgment. During the lunch, Elliot becomes extremely anxious when two security guards approach him, only to request his signature for Tyler. Elliot, already socially awkward and panicked, compounded by his morphine use, requests to use the restroom. In the restroom, Elliot struggles with his condition and is overwhelmed by thoughts of Tyler's potential plans involving the two security guards. Despite this, Elliot proceeds with his mission, successfully planting the Raspberry Pi into the control system. Tension peaks when Elliot is startled by approaching footsteps, realizing that Tyler is near the restroom. To avoid suspicion, Elliot quickly abandons the device and returns to his original position. A brief conversation reveals that the seemingly innocuous file actually has significant implications related to the capture of Colby. Tyler suspects Elliot's involvement in Colby's capture, attributing it to a long-standing grudge against E Corp following his father's death while working at the company. Tyler even hints that he could report Elliot for this suspicion. Fernando, despite being in prison, no longer deems the situation important, especially since he lacks strong evidence to report Elliot. Rather than worrying about his own potential capture related to Colby, Elliot is concerned that his actions with society might be discovered by Tyler. This concern brings Elliot some relief, knowing that his collaboration with Mr. Robot and the others remains undetected by Tyler or anyone else. Soon after, Elliot leaves the restroom and quickly finishes installing the Raspberry Pi into the control system. After completing the task, he and the society members rush to leave the location. Elliot also receives a call from Sila, informing him of a new job far removed from her previous profession. They briefly chat over the phone and arrange to meet. Meanwhile, Darlin, who had successfully infiltrated Steel Mountain and installed the Raspberry Pi, is dismayed to find that Darmy is no longer aligned with their mission. Consequently, Darlin confronts Cisco to understand Darmy's withdrawal. Cisco explains that Donald had already decided to withdraw long before Darmy and his group began their actions. Darlin, furious, throws a stack of books in Cisco's library. Elsewhere, Viral and Joanna are having dinner with Scott Knowledge, the new prospective CTO of E Corp. Viral, avoiding small talk, attempts to influence Scott to make him his assistant, similar to his previous involvement with Colby. However, Scott is not swayed by Viral's words and shows a suspicious demeanor, as if he is aware of the underlying motive behind the dinner invitation. Tyler, meanwhile, tries to approach Scott's wife, Sharon, questioning why she married Scott and even intruding into the restroom while she is using it, making her uncomfortable and revealing Tyler's true nature. Back at the society headquarters, Elliot and the team have arrived, but their success in planting the Raspberry Pi is met with dissatisfaction from Darlin and Trenton, who failed to recruit Darmy for their mission. Mr. Robot is furious with Darlin's reckless behavior and expresses his anger by destroying several computers, believing that Darlin's actions might jeopardize their mission. Elliot, noticing the tense atmosphere at the headquarters, avoids answering Sila's call but ultimately manages to calm Darlin down, improving the mood at the headquarters. Determined not to let Darlin's recklessness ruin their mission, Elliot decides to stay with Darlin at her apartment to help her relax and forget about the mission's frustrations. Upon arriving at her apartment, Elliot is shocked to find his dog barking excessively and the front door damaged. Inside, the apartment is in disarray. A ringing phone reveals Fernando on the other end, who, despite being in prison, threatens to expose Elliot if he doesn't fulfill his demand for immediate release. Fernando's threat prompts Elliot to realize that Fernando has discovered the identity of the person responsible for his imprisonment. Elliot explains that he has activated a signal tracker on his phone to locate all wireless signals, and that he has intercepted data on Fernando's drug syndicate. He uses this information as leverage, threatening to expose Fernando's criminal network to the authorities if he does not comply. Vera, Fernando's sister, then intercepts Elliot and forces him to meet her at a nearby location. She confronts him with a gun, upset about her brother's imminent release. Elliot realizes that Fernando's desire for freedom has put his own life at risk. He tells Vera that he is only following orders to free Fernando, and that he will not interfere with the siblings' future issues. Hearing this, Vera decides to leave with her gun, while Elliot and Vera prepare for Fernando's release. Despite initial worries, the anticipated moment arrives precisely at 10 p.m. when a power surge causes the prison's lights to go out, opening all cell doors. The inmates, including Fernando, break free. However, Fernando's liberation is met with an eerie silence. As Fernando locks eyes with Vera, he orders DJ to kill her before she can leave. Elliot, desperate, asks Fernando to free Sila, but instead, Fernando gives Elliot the car keys, revealing that Sila has been in the trunk all along. Rushing to the car, Elliot finds Sila dead with a gunshot wound to her chest. Overcome with grief and panic, Elliot is forced to leave the scene as the prison siren left a deep wound for Elliot. He was even seen enjoying his reflections on the memories he shared with her, particularly when Sheila had just moved into the unit next to his. For some reason, he had been immediately attracted to Sila, who at that time was introduced as a chatty and sociable character. A week had passed since Sila's death, and Elliot had been frequenting Krista's office for consultations about his issues. Meanwhile, Angela continued her efforts to seek justice for the environmental pollution case involving E Corp, now working with a lawyer named Anthra Nair to re-examine the case that had once shocked Washington. Unfortunately, this endeavor was also proving difficult, as several of her colleagues were still unwilling to get involved. Back at Elliot's workplace, he was suddenly summoned to Gideon's office. In the meeting, Gideon noticed a decline in Elliot's performance since Sheila's death and offered him annual leave. Elliot declined, claiming he was still fine and could work as usual. This made Gideon somewhat pessimistic, and he encouraged Elliot to continue working as before. Gideon also suggested that Elliot find a replacement for Sila or someone he could confide in to relieve his burdens. Gideon hoped this would help Elliot regain his enthusiasm for work. However, Elliot viewed Gideon's words as mere platitudes and not heartfelt. Elliot also reminisced about his hacking activities as a child and imagined what it would be like if hacking could be performed on people themselves, revealing their true identities through writings hanging around their necks. Before leaving Gideon's office, Elliot thanked him for the advice. Determined not to be haunted by Sheila's memory, Elliot copied all of Sila's data onto a CD, as he used to do with his past targets. At the Society headquarters, Mr. Robot, frustrated with the local government's dismissal of Society's efforts, approached Darlin, expressing continued optimism about their mission despite Darlin's apparent despair, especially after failing to recruit Darmy for support. Mr. Robot also decided to seek help from White Rose, but Garden only responded with laughter, revealing that White Rose was a mysterious hacker whose real-world identity was unknown. Garden also mentioned that she had repeatedly tried to access Cisco's database but always failed. Unhappy with this response, Mr. Robot decided to visit Romero, who had now immersed himself in his new herbal business. The conversation between them was cold, as Romero was no longer interested in the Society mission, especially since his new venture was quite successful without the risks associated with working with Mr. Robot. Enraged, Mr. Robot even drew a pistol on Romero, threatening him to rejoin Society. After this confrontation, Mr. Robot left with the demand that Romero return to the headquarters. At E Corp, the inauguration ceremony for Scott as the new director was held, with the elderly man repeatedly praising Scott, believing he would bring new changes to the company. This praise made Tyrell extremely angry, prompting him to approach Sharon, Scott's wife, once again, despite her repeated rejections and discomfort with his advances. Tyrell persisted, offering to discuss matters privately on the rooftop. Surprisingly, Sharon, who had already sensed Tyrell's ill intentions, met him on the rooftop. They began to enjoy their time together warmly, but unexpectedly, Tyrell, who had prepared to attack his boss's wife, strangled her to death. Tyrell appeared bewildered and confused, even crying out of fear after killing Sharon. He left the scene, leaving her body behind. Returning to Darlin, who was still contemplating Mr. Robot's words, he visited Cisco. Here it was revealed that Darlin's pretense of being Cisco to connect with White Rose had indeed elicited a response from the mysterious hacker. Cisco warned Darlin to be cautious when dealing with White Rose, highlighting the danger of the enigmatic hacker. This revelation seemed to restore Darlin's hope and motivation, as well as that of Society, which had previously waned. Not wanting to waste time, Darlin approached Trenton, trying to convince her to rejoin Society, considering their plan could be revived with White Rose's response. Trenton, however, declined, expressing a desire to focus on her studies. Despite this, Darlin persisted, repeatedly persuading her to return to Society. Meanwhile, an interesting development occurred during a meeting between Cisco and Ollie. Although they had never met in person before, Ollie seemed to avoid Cisco with a look of annoyance, as if he already knew that Cisco was the hacker who had breached his laptop. Interestingly, Cisco's visit was not to extort Ollie, but rather to request his assistance for an undisclosed purpose, as Cisco wanted to avoid getting further entangled in larger issues. He then stated that he was not someone who could help Cisco, but Cisco, insisting on seeking Ollie's assistance, even threatened him with a bigger problem if he refused. Back to Elliot, he now appeared to be visiting Krista again. But this time it was different from before. Not only did he arrive earlier, but Elliot also revealed Krista's true nature, including her habits such as not taking her medication, buying hazelnut lattes with an E Corp card, encouraging her clients to divorce their partners, obsessing over adult content, and wishing her own mother would die. Elliot also mentioned that he often watched Krista through her webcam without her realizing it. This made Elliot aware that the psychologist sometimes cried alone. Additionally, Elliot admitted that he frequently tapped into other people's gadgets, including those of his friends and colleagues, even Krista. However, he acknowledged that his actions had helped many people, even though he himself wanted to escape from his own problem. Loneliness, which he shared with Krista. Krista could only remain silent, embarrassed and worried, and she was unaware that her eyes were welling up with tears. In a luxurious apartment, Darlin was enjoying the view from the balcony when Alexander Lone, a legal expert working in the government, joined him. Their conversation was brief because Alex had to leave soon after. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, Garden searched the apartment, including opening the safe. Interestingly, the hacker woman only took a pistol, which she placed either in her pants or her bag to avoid the smell. At the same time, Elliot, who had just returned from the psychologist, felt very guilty for indirectly revealing Krista's true nature and her bad habits, just as he had with his previous targets. Elliot deleted all of Krista's data from his computer after copying it to a sinful CD and storing it with other CDs in a special storage. He then left his apartment to meet Mr. Robot, who was already waiting for him. They both quickly headed to their headquarters, where all the members had gathered to continue their plans. However, the meeting was brief because Elliot received a message from one of his colleagues, informing him that the online shop had been hacked. As a result, Elliot rushed to address the issue. Darlin suggested that Elliot protect himself with a pistol. Darlin did this following Cisco's advice that Drew was very dangerous, and Darlin had also felt as though he was being followed by a mysterious man while on the train. Despite this, Elliot refused the pistol, claiming he did not know how to use it and believing that the person targeted by White Rose was definitely not him. Concerned for Elliot's safety, Darlin decided to give him his personal phone number so that Elliot could contact him if needed. Although Elliot initially refused because exchanging phone numbers was against society's rules, Darlin disregarded the rules and saved his number in Elliot's phone. Unusually, Darlin even hugged Elliot as he left the society headquarters. Darlin also secretly hid the pistol in a popcorn machine. Unbeknownst to them, Mr. Robot saw Darlin's approach to Elliot and immediately followed Elliot before he could leave the headquarters. Mr. Robot demanded that Darlin's phone number be deleted from Elliot's phone, but Elliot resisted, claiming he would not use the number for any reason, and left the headquarters. Meanwhile, Tyrell, who had just killed Sharon, appeared very disoriented. He even accidentally spilled a drink on his clothes after bumping into one of his subordinates. Furthermore, Tyrell, who had initially avoided meeting anyone, was now confronted by Gideon, who was eager to discuss matters with him. Gideon revealed that one of the online shop employees had managed to sever the surveillance chain affecting Colby, which could potentially free Colby from legal troubles. This was contrary to Tyrell's goal of removing his former director. As a result, the online shop continued its efforts to uncover the hacker behind the file manipulation problem. Gideon explained that he would set up a honeypot with numerous servers mimicking the target of the malware. The aim was to trap the virus created by the hacker group in the decoy servers, allowing the outside party to trace the hacker behind the attack and the ownership of the files. Tyrell seemed interested in Gideon's plan and decided that the findings should be sent to him promptly. After Gideon left, Tyrell, still curious about society, began searching for information about the hacker group. Before he could find any information, his assistant, Elizabeth, arrived and informed him that the police had just arrived at their office following the discovery of Sharon's body on the rooftop. Upon hearing this, Tyrell panicked, pretending not to know about the body and refusing to meet the police, claiming he was busy with work and that anyone wishing to see him needed an appointment first. Shortly after, Tyrell left his office, asking his assistant to connect him with the server center. Meanwhile, in the archive office, employees were busy dealing with a mysterious hacker attack. However, something strange caught Anna's attention. The hacker was not targeting valuable items but merely taking control of the servers. Elliot suspected this might be a diversion, though he did not know exactly what the hackers were trying to distract from. Strangely, amidst the busy office, Ollie approached Elliot to ask him to deliver a damaged hard drive to a repair shop at 2 a.m. Ollie seemed to pressure Elliot into complying with his request, even discussing his higher position compared to Elliot, which allowed him to get what he wanted. Noticing Ollie's strange behavior, Elliot suspected that his colleague was under significant pressure and afraid of something. This suspicion led him to check Ollie's email, discovering a larger question mark involving Angela's involvement in the issue. Armed with the address Ollie had mentioned, Elliot began his journey to the repair shop. However, during his trip, he encountered Angela, who briefly explained that she was facing problems due to the hacking of Ollie's laptop. This led to them being extorted by the hacker. It was also revealed that Angela's actions at the online shop office were not her own initiative, but were carried out under the hacker's orders to install an application on her work computer. It turned out that the application was a virus, which led to the hacking incident currently affecting Offside. Upon hearing this confession, Elliot questioned Angela's failure to contact him immediately after the laptop was hacked. Angela responded by saying that Elliot was very difficult to reach at that time and that he had changed and was very different from before. Not wanting to waste any more time, Elliot continued his journey to the location Angela had mentioned. Upon arriving at the location, Elliot immediately sensed something unusual about the room, which appeared to be specially designed to avoid electromagnetic interference. This made the room inaccessible to radio signals, mobile networks, or even Wi-Fi connections, all intended to prevent hacking. In the room, Elliot encountered a man dressed in women's clothing. The man said he did not have much time for Elliot and only granted him 3 minutes for their meeting. Elliot quickly realized that the person in front of him was White Rose, whom society had been searching for. Elliot wasted no time and began asking White Rose a series of questions, including whether White Rose was ready to join society to further their mission. Unexpectedly, White Rose replied that Elliot had failed and wasted too much time dealing with Colby, not realizing that this could potentially endanger him, especially with Gideon's creation of a honeypot on his servers. Elliot was shocked and disbelieving about Gideon's actions. He again inquired about White Rose's readiness for the mission, but White Rose reiterated that Elliot and his team had squandered many opportunities. White Rose also stated that he valued time highly, metaphorically comparing Elliot's focus on hacking individuals to White Rose's own focus on hacking time. In their final conversation, White Rose gave Elliot and his team 50 hours and 23 minutes to prepare. If they were ready within that time, White Rose would proceed with his plans. Determined not to waste time, Elliot began thinking about how to dismantle the honeypot and contacted Darlin for help. Upon arriving at Elliot's office, Darlin found that Elliot had sent large 100 megabytes files to Gideon's phone, intending to drain its battery quickly. Gideon, noticing the phone's rapid battery drain, connected it to a charger. Meanwhile, Darlin displayed an exciting video on Gideon's office TV, which drew everyone's attention and allowed Elliot to access Gideon's phone to retrieve crucial data. Unfortunately, the video only lasted 90 seconds, which was not enough time for society to execute their plan. As other employees joined Gideon in watching the video, Elliot continued to hack Gideon's phone, racing against time. Gideon, noticing Elliot was not joining the others, began to suspect him and questioned him about his activities. Fortunately for Elliot, just as he was being interrogated by Gideon, John notified Gideon of an incoming call from E Corp, which caused Gideon to leave his desk quickly. Elliot took advantage of this distraction to send an email to Gideon's support team, requesting the removal of the honeypot from the online shop. Tyrell was meeting someone and appeared very serious about discussing his ambitions. Surprisingly, his conversation partner was Mr. Robot. It was unusual that they seemed to know each other, though their relationship was not entirely amicable. This was evident from Pharrell's questions about Mr. Robot's plans, which led to a heated argument between them. Frustrated by Mr. Robot's response, Pharrell was told to go home. Upon arriving home, Tyrell was upset by his wife's questions about Scott and the news of Sharon's death on the rooftop of Old Shep. His frustration was compounded by the arrival of two detectives seeking information from Tyrell and Joanna about their attendance at Scott's inauguration party the previous night. During the meeting, the detectives questioned Tyrell about his last encounter with Sharon that evening, but Tyrell remained tight-lipped. Suddenly, Joanna, who was in the kitchen, cried out in pain, drawing everyone's attention. Joanna was about to give birth, and Tyrell discovered a blood-stained fork, indicating that Joanna had taken drastic measures to protect Tyrell. Joanna had whispered to Tyrell that she would not allow him to be ensnared in legal trouble and leave her with their unborn baby. Returning to Elliot, he had successfully executed his plan against the honeypot and went to the amusement park to meet Darlin. They discussed their respective successes, and Darlin's joyous reaction confirmed that society could continue with their mission. Unexpectedly, Darlin was taken aback when Elliot kissed her. Darlin rejected the kiss and asked Elliot who he really was. Elliot, initially confused, realized that Darlin was actually his own sister. Overwhelmed with guilt and shame, Elliot fled, leaving Darlin behind. Elliot's mixed feelings of guilt and embarrassment led him to investigate his own identity. To his surprise, he found no data on any public records site, including no criminal records. Everything seemed to be empty, suggesting that Elliot, who had always lived in the virtual world, was truly undetectable or had no real personal data. Determined not to give up, Elliot revisited his CD collection and discovered a CD without a label. His curiosity was answered when he found that the unlabeled CD contained many childhood photos of himself with Mr. Robot, as well as a family photo showing himself, Mr. Robot, his mother, and young Darlin. Soon after, a knock at his apartment door revealed Mr. Robot. The scene opens with a view of a computer shop owned by Elliot's father, who is also named Mr. Robot. A visitor arrives at the shop, not to consult about computer equipment, but to confront Elliot, accusing him of stealing money while purchasing a mouse at the store. The visitor claimed that his money had decreased since paying for the mouse. At that moment, Elliot was right behind him. This led the visitor to accuse Elliot of stealing his money. Despite the accusation, Elliot remained calm and did not get angry without any reason or proof. Instead, he ignored the visitor and diverted his attention to a newspaper. Frustrated by the shop owner's attitude, the visitor decided to leave, stating that he would never buy anything from the store again. Shortly after, a young Elliot appeared from behind a door, seemingly hiding out of fear from the visitor. Mr. Robot then asked him about the visitor's claims and demanded the stolen money back. Although Elliot initially denied the accusation, he eventually handed over $20, which was the amount he had taken. Mr. Robot, despite finding out that his son had stolen from the visitor, decided to use the money to watch a movie. He said that while Elliot's actions were wrong, he was still a good child and told the story in a specific manner. As time passed, Mr. Robot's store was gradually replaced by other businesses until it eventually became a branch of Bank of E Corp. Returning to the present, Elliot, who had just met Mr. Robot, marveled at the sight of him, not realizing that his father was still alive. He repeatedly reassured himself that the man in front of him was indeed his father. However, his emotions soon shifted from admiration to anger towards Mr. Robot, remembering how his father had left him when he was still a child. Mr. Robot also expressed his surprise at Elliot for forgetting Darlin, who was his sister. The meeting was briefly marked by a small commotion before settling into a quieter atmosphere when Mr. Robot discovered someone outside the apartment who was stalking them. He revealed that these individuals did not want him and Elliot to work together. Mr. Robot also tried to make Elliot understand that his efforts and all the medication he had been taking had caused him to lose his mind and memory, leading him to forget Darlin and his past life. Elliot's mind was highly troubled, not only due to his efforts to stay grounded, but also because of the significant questions about his father, whom he believed had died 20 years ago. The hacker continuously sought answers about what had happened in his life, and Mr. Robot eventually took him to a different place. Meanwhile, Gideon and Hari were seen having breakfast together. Unlike usual, Gideon appeared very distressed as he was preoccupied with the fate of Halsam, which was now on the brink of collapse, especially with the media continuously reporting on the hacking incident affecting the company. This raised further questions about Outside's credibility as a cybersecurity firm. Elsewhere, Nair and his team were busy preparing everything needed to handle the lawsuit against E Corp, particularly with Colby's statement about his involvement in the waste pollution case approaching. Angela, who had just arrived, was warmly welcomed by the lawyer. However, it was unexpectedly revealed that Angela was not there to discuss the lawsuit against E Corp. Instead, she was offering herself for a position at the firm following her recent resignation from society. Nair, upon hearing this, politely declined Angela's offer. Despite his hopes for the continuation of the lawsuit process, Angela seemed to insist on being accepted as an employee there. Their conversation ended with Angela leaving the lawyer's office. Angela then received a call from Darlin, inquiring about Elliot's whereabouts, as he was known not to be at the office. They decided to meet at a location where Darlin informed Angela that Elliot had acted irrationally by attempting to kiss her the previous night. Angela wasn't too surprised, as she knew Elliot's behavior had changed drastically and become strange. Angela even expressed her disappointment to Darlin, stating that Elliot's odd behavior had started after Darlin's arrival some time ago. She also questioned the intensity of the recent meetings between Elliot and Darlin. Frustrated, Angela left Darlin. His journey with Mr. Robot continued to be marked by debates about his past, including Darlin's condition, which he feared might be in danger. Meanwhile, Tyrell and Joanna were at the hospital following the birth of their child. However, the moment was tainted by Joanna's disappointment with Tyrell for not resolving issues related to his career and Sharon's death. She even threatened her husband to address these problems promptly if he wished to continue their marriage. Tyrell's frustration was further exacerbated when he was confronted by Philip in his office. Philip revealed that the police now suspected Tyrell of being involved in Sharon's murder, leading him to decide to terminate Tyrell immediately. Tyrell, enraged, was further distressed by the increased living expenses for his new child. However, Philip could do little as he was aware of the damage to Tyrell's reputation and the competitive nature between Tyrell and Scott, especially with the arrival of the new director. In a surprising turn, Gideon, who intended to retrieve the hard drive taken by Elliot, discovered that the place had been destroyed by a fire. It was revealed that the store was not actually owned by White Rose. Instead, the mysterious hacker had used it secretly when he was out of town. Worse, White Rose and his team had intentionally caused an electrical short circuit that burned down the entire store, leaving no trace. Gideon experienced another setback when he arrived at his office to find a system failure with the honeypot. It was not a system failure but rather a request from his own email asking for the honeypot to be removed from their servers. During a phone call, Gideon insisted that he had never sent such an email, attributing it to the ongoing hack at E Corp. However, this explanation did not change anything, as the staff followed the instructions in the email he supposedly sent. Back with Elliot, he and Mr. Robot had arrived at their old house. They went to Elliot's childhood room, where Elliot was reminded of a traumatic memory when his father had thrown him out of the window in anger. In a fit of rage, Elliot tried to push Mr. Robot out of the window, insisting that his father should experience what he had endured as a child. Although Mr. Robot claimed the incident was just an accident, Elliot, overtaken by anger, forcefully threw him out of the window just as his father had done years ago. Meanwhile, Angela, at her parents' house, was informed by her father that Darlin had been seen loitering around Elliot's old home. Angela hurried to the location and, along with Darlin, sneaked into the house to search for Elliot. They found broken glass from a damaged window, which reminded them of an incident from Elliot's childhood, confirming that he might have recently left the location. At Elliot's grave site, Elliot was seen helping Mr. Robot, who was in pain from falling out of the window. Their progress halted when Mr. Robot, panicked upon seeing Angela and Darlin approaching, revealed that he had been trying to tell the truth all along, while worrying about the two women. Elliot, confused, wondered why his father was so concerned about Angela and Darlin, who were not supposed to be a threat. Mr. Robot insisted that everyone would be in danger and urged Elliot to get rid of them, while continuously reassuring him that he would never leave him alone. When Angela and Darlin arrived at Elliot's location, they found no sign of Mr. Robot, only a grave marked with the name Edward Alderson, Elliot's real father. Angela and Darlin grew suspicious of what Elliot had done at his father's grave. Gradually, Elliot began to realize that Mr. Robot, whom he thought was his father, was merely an illusion. The figure he had visualized as his father was a creation of his own, not seen or acknowledged by anyone else. This realization began to make Elliot understand that Mr. Robot was a creation of his own mind. In other words, that he and Mr. Robot were the same person. The three of them then left the cemetery, ending their parting at a train station, as Elliot and Darlin had to return to Washington. Interestingly, when Angela arrived home, she found Colby waiting for her. Instead of discussing the environmental pollution case that had implicated her, Colby came to offer Angela a job at E Corp, with a highly attractive position and an impressive salary. Angela was initially adamant about refusing, insisting she would not be part of a company that had caused her mother's death. However, Colby easily persuaded her by arguing that everyone was trying to ruin the world, including Angela herself, without her realizing it. Colby left, stating that the job offer would only be valid until the next day. Meanwhile, at their apartment, Elliot and Darlin discussed the fate of their project. Elliot initially doubted the continuation of their plans, as he had always operated under Mr. Robot's guidance. However, Darlin assured him that all the actions of the group had been undertaken by Elliot himself, including the brilliant ideas he had. She repeatedly tried to convince him to continue their plans with the website. Elliot then decided to go out to buy the necessary medications. Shortly after Darlin left the apartment, Tyrell unexpectedly appeared, talking about the next exciting plan and claiming that he knew everything about the hacker group's actions, which were orchestrated by Elliot. Tyrell, who had a psychopathic nature, even recounted the murder of Sheeran, threatening Elliot to reveal his plans with the website if he didn't want his life to end tragically. Elliot reluctantly complied with Tyrell's demands about the website and the hacker group's plans. At the headquarters, Elliot began showing Tyrell the working conditions and what he had done with the website. Tyrell responded by saying that from now on, Elliot would work with him. Meanwhile, Krista, who had started to forget Michael, encountered her former boyfriend again. Their meeting sparked a small argument, especially when Krista discovered Michael had lied to her, including about his real name, which was Lenny. The conversation shifted to Elliot when Lenny revealed that Krista's patient was the hacker who had breached his social media accounts, leading to the collapse of his marriage and subsequent divorce. Lenny had reported the hacking to the police but lacked sufficient evidence to capture the hacker. Hence, Lenny sought Krista's help for additional information. However, Krista's frustration with her former boyfriend led her to dismiss Lenny, keeping the secrets about Elliot to herself. Returning to Elliot, who had previously been with Tyrell, he suddenly woke up in his car, but he couldn't remember what had happened. A parking attendant informed him that the car had been parked for 2 days. Not wanting to dwell on his confusion, Elliot nonchalantly left the location. Upon returning to his headquarters, Elliot was confused to find that everything had already been accomplished, including Darlin's claim that support for the website had come from many people, with protests occurring around the city. Elliot was puzzled by the fact that he had supposedly been missing for 3 days and had completed all the missions alone. The situation became even more confusing when he saw news about the website's impact, including the police's intensified pursuit with Tyrell, but found that Tyrell was no longer working at E Corp. Shortly afterward, a TV broadcast showed a video from Anonymous, featuring a masked man declaring that the world was now free from financial enslavement due to the destruction of banking data. This action had eliminated people's debts, indirectly benefiting them. Anonymous also claimed that the opening of the stock market that day signaled the death knell for E Corp, suggesting that the giant company's downfall was imminent. This heroic act by the Anonymous group seemed to have garnered widespread support, evident from the protesters wearing anonymous masks. Meanwhile, Angela, who had been swayed by Colby's offer, decided to take the job at E Corp. Her role was to act as a public relations officer and assistant to James Fluffy, a high-ranking official in the company. Angela prepared everything for her new boss, who was set to hold a press conference regarding the negative news surrounding E Corp. During the press conference, Fluffy answered questions from the media. Surprisingly, instead of addressing the drastic decline in E Corp stock value, he shifted the focus to acknowledge that his team was still concentrating on technical issues. The destruction of E Corp's data center was also discussed, with Fluffy absurdly claiming that the White House would assist in protecting the company's assets. He assured the public not to worry about the current problems, although he couldn't avoid further questions. Flavy finally began to reveal what was on his mind, which he thought was completely chaotic, much like his life, especially since his retirement funds and all his savings had been invested in the company. He also admitted that the situation at E Corp was on the brink of collapse and was nearly impossible to fix. Hearing this, Angela initially considered interrupting Flavy to correct his statements, but she was too late. Her new boss pulled a pistol from his bag and shot Flavy in the mouth, the bullet exiting through the back of his head. After the incident, Angela was seen with Philip in the E Corp lobby, discussing the next agenda. Philip then left, giving Angela some money with the pretext that she could buy new shoes, as the ones she was wearing were stained with blood. Back with Elliot, who couldn't find Tyrell, he decided to visit Tyrell's residence directly but found no trace of him. While driving, he encountered Joanna. They had a brief conversation, where Joanna mentioned that Taylor had tried to contact her, stating he was stuck in traffic. Elliot, not wanting to reveal his true identity, claimed to be Ollie and a business associate of Tyrell. Elliot felt something was off when Joanna mentioned that Tyrell had been missing for 3 days, but his wife said she had been in touch with him over the phone. Joanna also inquired about Tyrell's strange behavior when they last met. Shortly after, Elliot decided to leave the location. At the KRL parking lot, Elliot continued to search for Tyrell, even rummaging through the contents of his car. He found a pair of glasses that contained a flash drive. Curious, Elliot visited an internet cafe to check the contents of the flash drive. The drive held a video showing Elliot falling in a seaside park some time ago. Strangely, the video clearly showed Elliot falling alone, with no one pushing him. This led Elliot to realize that Mr. Robot was a figment of his own imagination. Nevertheless, he became intrigued again and decided to try to bring Mr. Robot back into his life. Elliot pretended to call the police to lure Mr. Robot out. As a result, Mr. Robot appeared beside him. Curious about Tyrell's whereabouts, Elliot threw Mr. Robot against the wall, demanding that he reveal Tyrell's location. However, Mr. Robot said that Elliot created him and should be able to answer the question himself. The confrontation between Elliot and Mr. Robot escalated, spilling into the streets of Washington, which were crowded with protesters who saw the website as their savior. The conflict between the two continued, even manifesting as the image of Elliot's mother and his younger self. Elliot blamed himself for all the problems. However, this did not last long, as Elliot managed to calm himself. Suddenly, everyone in front of him disappeared. In the end, Philip was at a lavish party with elites discussing future plans, including the Volta mining project in Congo. Among the guests was a man of Asian descent, who resembled White Rose, suggesting that Elliot's journey was still long, and there were many mysteries yet to be uncovered. This is the end of Season 1, Mr. Robot. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this movie recap. See you back in Season 2.